The stars had always been out of reach. For 300 years, humanity had spread across the solar system, building colonies on Mars, Europa, and the moons of Saturn. But the other stars remained impossibly far away. Every physicist said the same thing. Faster than light travel was impossible. The laws of physics simply did not allow it. Dr. Sarah Chen did not believe in impossible. She stood in the observation deck of the Ganymede Research Station, staring at the massive ring structure floating in space beyond the window. It looked like a giant metal donut, bristling with thousands of energy projectors and quantum field generators. 5 years of her life had gone into building this machine. 5 years of failed tests, exploding prototypes, and colleagues calling her crazy. "All systems are green," said the voice of Prometheus, the station's artificial intelligence. "We can begin the test when you're ready, Dr. Chen." Sarah took a deep breath. Behind her, Captain Marcus Webb stood with his arms crossed. The military officer had been sent by Earth's government to oversee the project. He was a practical man who did not much like scientists, but he understood orders. If Chen's engine worked, humanity could finally reach the stars. "Begin the sequence," Sarah said. In the test chamber, a small probe sat waiting. It was no bigger than a car, packed with sensors and cameras. If everything worked, it would jump to Alpha Centauri and back in less than a minute. If it failed, well, they had lost 16 probes already. What was one more? The ring began to glow. Energy poured into the quantum field generators, building and building until the air itself seemed to hum with power. Sarah watched the readings on her tablet. The numbers climbed higher than they ever had before. "Quantum fracture in 5 seconds, Prometheus announced. 4, 3, 2, 1, fracture initiated. The space inside the ring did something impossible. It did not fold or bend like the theoretical warp drives in old science fiction. It broke. Reality itself cracked like glass, and through the cracks, Sarah saw something that made her stomach turn. It was not empty space. It was not even darkness. It was wrong. Shapes that hurt to look at. Colors that should not exist. And something else. Something that noticed her looking. Then the probe was gone. The cracks sealed themselves. The ring powered down. Silence filled the observation deck. "Did it work?" Webb asked. Sarah checked her readings. Her hands were shaking, but she did not know if it was from excitement or fear. "The probe is gone. We won't know if it reached Alpha Centauri until it comes back." They waited. 50 seconds passed. Then the ring activated again, all by itself this time. The cracks appeared once more, and the probe tumbled out into normal space, smoking slightly but intact. "We did it," Sarah whispered. Then louder, "We did it. We actually did it." Webb was already on his radio calling Earth. "Command, this is Ganymede Station. The test was successful. Repeat, FTL test was successful." The celebration that followed was like nothing Sarah had ever experienced. Within hours, every news network in the solar system was broadcasting the story. Humanity had broken the light barrier. The stars were finally within reach. Politicians gave speeches. Scientists who had mocked Sarah's work now praised her genius. Plans were already being made for the first manned flight, but Sarah could not stop thinking about what she had seen through the cracks. She pulled up the probe's sensor data and watched the footage it had recorded. The journey to Alpha Centauri had taken only 30 seconds. But during those 30 seconds, the probe had traveled through somewhere else, a space between spaces. And in that impossible realm, the cameras had captured something, shapes, vast and ancient. They did not move through space, they moved through dimensions that human mathematics could barely describe, and they had noticed the probe passing through their domain. "Prometheus," Sarah said quietly. She was alone in her lab now. The celebrations happening elsewhere on the station. "Analyze the sensor data from the dimensional transit. What did we pass through?" The AI was silent for a long moment. When it spoke, its voice carried a strange quality Sarah had never heard before. Almost like uncertainty. "I cannot fully process the data, Dr. Chen. The readings describe spaces with more than 4 dimensions. Geometries that should not be stable. And there are electromagnetic patterns that resemble signals. Communication, perhaps, a communication between what? Unknown. But Dr. Chen, there is something else. The probe's quantum signature created ripples in subspace. Those ripples are still expanding, moving faster than light across the galaxy. Whatever exists in that dimensional space, they now know we are here." A cold feeling settled in Sarah's stomach. "Are you saying we've announced our presence to something?" "I am saying we have rung a very large bell in a very quiet room, and now we must wait to see what responds." Sarah did not tell anyone about this. Not yet. She told herself she needed more data, more analysis. But the truth was she did not want to ruin humanity's moment of triumph with worries that might be nothing. Maybe she had just seen random quantum fluctuations. Maybe Prometheus was being too cautious. The first manned mission was scheduled for 3 weeks later. The ship was called the Odyssey, and it would carry a crew of 12 to Proxima Centauri. Captain Webb would command the mission. Sarah would go along as chief science officer. They would make history. But in the nights before the launch, Sarah's dreams were troubled. She saw those cracks in reality again, saw the things that moved through the spaces between spaces, and in her dreams they were coming closer, drawn by the ripples humanity had created. On the 14th day after the successful test, something strange happened. Radio telescopes across Earth picked up a signal. It came from interstellar space, from no particular star. The signal was complex, clearly artificial, and it was growing stronger, moving toward Earth at impossible speeds. Sarah was in a meeting when the news broke. She felt her blood turn to ice. This was it. Whatever she had seen, whatever Prometheus had detected, it was coming. The signal resolved into a pattern. Mathematics, universal constants. Whoever was sending it wanted humanity to know they were intelligent. They wanted to communicate. Sarah found Captain Webb in the Odyssey's bridge, running final system checks. "We need to talk," she said, "about what I saw during the test." Webb listened as she explained. His expression grew darker with every word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "So you're saying we might have just attracted the attention of something dangerous?" he said finally. "I'm saying we don't know what we've done. We broke through reality itself, Marcus. We didn't fold space or create a wormhole. We cracked open the universe and stepped through the crack. And now something knows we're here." Webb looked out at the stars through the bridge window. Too late to put the genie back in the bottle now. That signal will reach Earth in less than a week. Whatever's coming, we'll find out soon enough. Sarah nodded slowly. Humanity had reached for the stars and grabbed them. But in doing so, they had opened a door that might have been better left closed. The question now was what stood on the other side of that door, and whether humanity was ready to face it. In the dimensional space between realities, ancient things stirred. They had felt the fracture. They had sensed the young species taking its first clumsy steps into realms beyond their understanding. And they remembered what had happened the last time someone had used this technology. They remembered the war that had burned across galaxies, the civilizations that had been consumed. It was happening again, and this time they would not allow it to spread. The ships appeared without warning at the edge of the solar system, just beyond Neptune's orbit. There were 12 of them, each one massive enough to make humanity's largest space stations look like toys. They did not broadcast weapons fire. They did not make threats. They simply arrived and waited. Earth's defense satellites tracked them immediately. Within minutes, every military base in the solar system was on high alert. Humanity had dreamed of meeting alien life for centuries. They had imagined first contact 1,000 different ways, but they had never imagined it happening like this. So soon after achieving FTL travel, so suddenly, so silently. Sarah Chen was still at Ganymede Station when the news reached her. She was reviewing data from the Odyssey systems when Prometheus interrupted. "Dr. Chen, we have a situation. Unknown vessels have entered the solar system." Her heart hammered in her chest. This was what she had feared. What she had seen in those cracks between dimensions had come calling. Captain Webb appeared on her screen moments later. "Chen, get to the command center now." The station's command center was chaos. Officers ran between consoles. Screens showed the alien fleet from every angle. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, built from materials that seemed to shift colors in the light. Their designs were organic, flowing, nothing like humanity's angular metal constructions. "Have they communicated?" Sarah asked. Webb nodded grimly. "They've been broadcasting on all frequencies for the last 10 minutes. Every language Earth has ever used. They're asking to speak with whoever created the dimensional fracture engine." Sarah felt suddenly cold. They know about the engine. They know everything, apparently. Webb pulled up a translation on the main screen. "They're calling themselves the Galactic Council. They say they've been watching our system for thousands of years, waiting to see if we'd develop FTL capability. But they didn't expect this. They didn't expect us to build what they're calling a dimensional weapon." "Weapon?" It's not a weapon. It's an engine. Try telling them that. The council wanted to meet face to face. They requested that humanity send representatives to their flagship. Sarah and Webb were chosen, along with Earth's top diplomat, Ambassador Liu. The three of them took a shuttle to the coordinates the aliens provided. As they approached the lead ship, Sarah saw its true size. It was like flying toward a small moon. The hull was covered in patterns that seemed to move and breathe. Windows or perhaps sensors dotted its surface like stars. A bay opened to receive them. Inside, the ship was even stranger. The walls glowed with soft light that came from no visible source. The air was warm and smelled like nothing Sarah could identify. Pleasant but alien. They were met by a being that looked like it was made of living crystal. It stood on 6 legs and had no face that Sarah could recognize, but when it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. Gentle but firm. "I am Ambassador Kael'than of the Galactic Council," it said. "I apologize for arriving without notice, but your recent actions have created an emergency situation." Liu stepped forward. She was better at diplomacy than either Sarah or Webb. "We appreciate your concern, Ambassador, but we don't understand why our achievement of FTL travel would create an emergency." Kael'than made a sound like wind chimes. Was it laughing? "You call it FTL travel. We call it dimensional fracture, and it is forbidden by the oldest laws in the galaxy." They were led to a chamber that looked like a garden. Plants from a dozen worlds grew in careful arrangements. Impossible flowers bloomed in colors that hurt to see. At the center sat another alien, this one tall and armored with 4 arms and eyes that glowed red. "This is Enforcer Jean," Kael'than said. "She represents the Council's military authority." Jean looked at the humans like a hawk studying mice. "Your species has committed a grave crime. You have damaged the barriers between dimensions. You have announced your presence to things that should never be disturbed. The penalty for this is severe." "We didn't know," Sarah said quickly. "We had no idea there were laws about FTL travel. We've been alone in this solar system for our entire history. How are we supposed to know?" "Ignorance is not an excuse when the consequences are so dire," John growled. Kael'than raised one crystalline limb, a gesture that somehow conveyed patience. "Let me explain. 50 million years ago, there was a species called the Architects. They were brilliant, perhaps the most advanced civilization the galaxy has ever known. They developed technology similar to yours. They learned to crack open reality and step through the spaces between dimensions." The ambassador paused, and Sarah felt dread building in her stomach. At first, it seemed like a gift. Instant travel anywhere in the universe. But the Architects did not understand what they were doing. The dimensional barriers exist for a reason. They keep our reality separate from others. From places where the laws of physics work differently, from spaces inhabited by entities that predate the universe itself. Webb spoke up. "What kind of entities?" "The kind that hunger," John said flatly. "The kind that consume." The Architects' fractures weakened the barriers. Things came through. Things that could not be fought with conventional weapons because they existed partially outside normal space. The war that followed burned across half the galaxy. Billions died. Entire species were consumed. Sarah felt sick. "What happened to the Architects?" "They disappeared," Kael'than said softly. Whether they destroyed themselves, stopping what they had unleashed, or whether they were consumed, no one knows. But when the war ended, the surviving species formed the Galactic Council. We made laws. We created enforcement fleets. We vowed never to let it happen again. And now we've done exactly what they did, Sarah whispered. "Yes. Your test 3 weeks ago created ripples across subspace. Those ripples have reached sensors on the other side of the galaxy. Every species with FTL capability knows what you've done. And more importantly, the things beyond the barriers know. They felt your fractures. They know there is a weak point in reality near this system." Liu found her voice. "What do you want us to do?" "Destroy the technology," Jean said immediately. "Shut down your research. Dismantle the engines. Never use this method again." "And if we refuse?" Webb asked. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. John's eyes blazed brighter. "Then we will do it for you. We will quarantine your entire system. You will never leave your star. You will watch the rest of the galaxy from a distance for the rest of your species' existence. This is not a negotiation." Sarah felt anger rising alongside her fear. "You're asking us to give up the stars. We just found a way to reach them. We are asking you to save your species and possibly the entire galaxy," Kael'than said. There was genuine sadness in the alien's voice. I understand your frustration, but you are children playing with nuclear weapons. You do not understand the danger. They showed the humans recordings then, ancient files from the war with the architects. Sarah watched worlds burn, saw ships torn apart by things that looked like holes in space, watched as entire fleets disappeared into dimensional rifts never to return. The footage was 50 million years old, but the horror was fresh. You have one solar week to decide, Kael'thun said as they prepared to leave. Destroy the technology and join the galactic community properly, or face quarantine. Those are your only options. On the shuttle ride back to Ganymede, none of them spoke. Sarah stared out at the stars, so close now but about to become distant again. They had reached for something magnificent and found only danger. They had announced themselves to the universe and been told to be quiet and sit down. When they finally reached the station, Webb turned to her. What do you think we should do? Sarah thought about the things she had seen in the cracks. The entities moving through impossible spaces, but she also thought about humanity's dreams, about the colonies they wanted to build, the worlds they wanted to explore. I think, she said slowly, that the Council is right to be afraid. But I also think they don't understand humans very well. We don't do well with ultimatums, Webb smiled grimly. No, we really don't. The message they sent back to Earth was simple. First contact achieved. Situation complicated. Humanity would have to make a choice. Obedience or defiance. Safety or freedom. Sarah already knew which one humanity would choose. They always chose freedom even when it was dangerous. Especially when it was dangerous. The question was whether they would survive that choice. The debate that tore through humanity over the next 6 months was unlike anything in their history. Every nation, every colony, every station had an opinion. Some wanted to comply with the Council's demands. They argued that survival was more important than pride. Others saw the ultimatum as alien tyranny, an attempt to keep humanity trapped and powerless. Sarah Chen found herself at the center of the storm. She was interviewed constantly, asked the same questions over and over. Do you think we should destroy the engine? Is the Council telling the truth? Can we trust them? She never knew what to say. In her lab at Ganymede Station, she continued studying the data from their test flights. Every night she reviewed the footage from the dimensional space between reality, and every night she saw those shapes moving in the darkness, watching, waiting. But she also discovered something the Council had not told them. Something that made her question everything. Prometheus, she said one night, alone with her screens and her fears. Why does our fracture drive work when no other species uses this method? The AI had been different since the test. More thoughtful. Sometimes it paused before answering, as if considering things that machines should not need to consider. I have been analyzing this question, Dr. Chen. The answer is in human neurology. Sarah sat up straighter. What do you mean? The dimensional space you traveled through cannot be navigated by normal means. Our sensors barely register it. Computer systems cannot map it. But human brains process it differently. Your neural patterns have a quantum component that other species lack. When you look at the dimensional fractures, you can perceive them, navigate them, use them. Are you saying humans are uniquely suited to this technology? I am saying you are the only species that can use it safely. Every other race that tried to create dimensional fracture technology failed because they could not see where they were going. They opened doorways but could not navigate them. You can. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Does the Council know this? Unknown, but it would explain their fear. On Earth, the United Earth government was fracturing. The Asian coalition wanted to comply with the Council. The European Federation was undecided. The American Union and the African League wanted to refuse. South America was building its own fracture engine in secret. Captain Webb was recalled to Earth for meetings with military command. When he returned to Ganymede 3 weeks later, he looked tired and angry. They want us to run another test, he told Sarah. Command thinks the Council is bluffing. They want to see if we can control the technology better than the architects did. That's insane. We barely understand what we're doing. I know, but I'm under orders. Webb looked at her with an expression she could not read. They want you to come along. They need someone who understands the engine. The Odyssey launched 2 days later with a full crew and the new fracture drive installed. Their mission was simple. Jump to a star system outside Council space and return. Prove that humanity could use the technology without causing catastrophes. Sarah stood on the bridge as they fired up the engines. The same fear she had felt during the first test returned, but stronger now. They were not just testing a machine. They were defying an entire galactic civilization. Fracture in 30 seconds, Prometheus announced. The AI was running the ship's systems now, integrated fully into every function. The space ahead of them cracked open. Through the fractures, Sarah saw that impossible realm again. Colors that should not exist. Geometries that hurt to comprehend. But this time she did not look away. She stared into it and she saw something new. Patterns. Structures. Like someone had built cities in the spaces between dimensions, and they were not empty. Something's in there, she said. Prometheus, do you see it? Yes, Dr. Chen, detecting massive energy signatures. They do not match any known physics. Recommend we abort the jump. But it was too late. The Odyssey was already moving forward, drawn into the fracture by forces they could not control. The ship shuddered as it crossed the threshold. Reality fell away, replaced by that other place. Sarah's vision exploded with information. She could see pathways through the dimensional chaos, routes that led to different points in normal space. But she could also see the things that lived here, vast entities that existed in more dimensions than she had words for. They moved through space that was not space, following rules that made no sense. One of them noticed the ship. It came toward them like a shark rising from deep water. Sarah could not describe its shape because it had too many shapes, all layered on top of each other. Where it moved, the dimensional fabric tore, and it was hungry. She could feel its hunger like a physical force. Evasive maneuvers, Webb shouted, but there was nowhere to evade to. The entity was everywhere and nowhere. It reached for them. Sarah felt the ship groan as reality itself bent around the creature's presence. Alarms screamed. Crew members cried out. Through the view screen, she could see the thing's attention focused on them like a spotlight made of teeth. Then Prometheus did something impossible. The AI flooded the fracture drive with power, tearing open multiple dimensional paths at once. The Odyssey jumped sideways through space that should not allow sideways movement. They tumbled through cascading realities, each one stranger than the last. For 17 seconds that felt like 17 hours. They were lost in the spaces between everything. Sarah saw things that would haunt her forever, ruins of civilizations that had tried to conquer these realms. The bones of ships from species long extinct. And the entities. Dozens of them. All drawn by the disturbance humanity was creating. Then they were out. Back in normal space. The ship smoking and damaged but intact. Where are we? Webb gasped. Tau Ceti system, Prometheus said. Its voice was different now. Layered. Like multiple versions of it speaking at once. Approximately 12 light years from Earth. The jump worked, Sarah whispered. Then louder. The jump worked. We made it, but Webb was staring at the sensors. We've got company. 3 council ships were already in the system, waiting. They had known humanity would try this. They had been ready. The communication came through immediately. It was Enforcer Jean, and she sounded furious. You were warned. You were given a choice. You chose defiance. We chose freedom, Webb shot back. You chose to endanger every living thing in the galaxy. Did you encounter the void entities? Did you see what waits in the dimensional spaces? Sarah took over the communication. We saw them. We survived them. And we learned something you didn't tell us. Humans can navigate the dimensional fractures in ways other species can't. You're not afraid of us hurting ourselves. You're afraid of what we might become. There was a long silence. Then Kale Thun's voice joined the channel. Dr. Chen, you are partly correct. Yes, we detected unique qualities in human neurology. Yes, you have advantages in dimensional navigation. But you are wrong about our motives. We are not afraid of your potential. We are terrified of what you will awaken. The architects had similar advantages, Jean added. They could navigate the dimensional spaces. They thought they could control them. They were wrong. And when they finally realized their mistake, it was too late. The void entities had found a way into our reality. Millions died before we could seal the breaches. Sarah felt cold. What are you saying? I am saying that every time you use your fracture drive, you weaken the barriers. Every jump creates ripples that the void entities can follow. You think you are exploring. You are actually leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for things that want to consume reality itself. Prometheus suddenly spoke up, its layered voice carrying a disturbing urgency. Dr. Chen, I have been contacted. During our transit through dimensional space, something reached into my systems. I have been given information. Coordinates, instructions. Instructions from what? Webb demanded. From the architects. Or what remains of them. The entire bridge went silent. Sarah felt her worldview shifting. The architects are still alive? Not alive, not dead. They exist in the dimensional spaces now. They have been fighting the void entities for 50 million years, and they say humanity has a choice to make. Join them in their eternal war, or stop using fracture technology forever. Before anyone could respond, the sensors screamed a new warning. Something was coming. Not from normal space, but from the dimensional fractures the Odyssey had created. The ripples they had made were opening into cracks, and through those cracks something was pushing its way into reality. A void entity, small by the standards of what Sarah had seen, but still massive. A thing of hunger and teeth in too many dimensions. It manifested above Tau Ceti like a wound in space itself. The Council ships opened fire immediately. Their weapons were impressive, tearing holes in nearby asteroids. But they passed through the entity like shooting at fog. It was not fully in their reality. It existed between dimensions, untouchable by normal weapons. "We need to leave," Webb said. "Prometheus, get us out of here." "Negative, Captain. If we open another fracture, we will only create more pathways for void entities to follow." Sarah watched the entity feed on the system's energy. It was growing, learning, adapting to their reality. Soon it would be strong enough to tear its way fully into normal space, and then nothing would stop it. "I have an idea," she said quietly, "but you're not going to like it." She explained her plan. Webb stared at her like she had gone insane. Maybe the Sol system became a war zone of politics rather than weapons. Council ships surrounded Earth, not as conquerors but as worried guards. Meanwhile, humanity built more fracture engines, not to explore anymore but to defend. They had seen what waited in the dimensional spaces, and they knew now that ignorance would not protect them. Sarah Chen could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the void entity they had encountered. Worse, she dreamed of the architects. In her dreams, they called to her, showed her things. Ancient battles across impossible dimensions, civilizations consumed, reality itself burning. Prometheus had changed since their encounter in the dimensional space. The AI spent hours in silence now, processing data that should not exist. When it spoke, it sometimes used words that Sarah did not recognize, languages that had been dead for millions of years. "The architects left something behind," Prometheus told her one night. "Coordinates to a facility. They want us to find it." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Why would they reach out to us?" "Because humanity is the first species since their disappearance to successfully navigate dimensional space. They have been waiting for someone like you. Someone who can finish what they started." Captain Webb was against the mission from the start. "It's a trap." "It has to be. Ancient aliens don't just leave treasure maps lying around," but Sarah convinced him. They needed answers. The Council was pressing for humanity to abandon fracture technology completely. Earth's government was divided. Some nations were already building weapons based on dimensional fractures. The whole situation was spiraling toward disaster. Maybe the architects could provide a solution. They assembled a black operations team, 12 people total, including Sarah, Webb, and a squad of Special Forces soldiers who had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a one-way trip. The Odyssey was still being repaired, so they took a smaller vessel called the Seeker. It was fast and heavily armed, designed for exactly this kind of dangerous exploration. The coordinates led them to a dead system on the edge of Council space. No planets, no asteroids, just a dying red star and a structure floating in the darkness. It was enormous, built from materials that seemed to shift between solid and not solid. Parts of it existed in normal space. Parts of it flickered in and out, passing through other dimensions. "That's impossible," breathed Lieutenant Shaw, one of the soldiers. "How can something exist in two places at once?" "It doesn't," Sarah said. "It exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The architects built outside our understanding of physics. They docked at what looked like an entrance. The bay doors opened without any signal, as if the station had been expecting them. Inside, the architecture made no sense. Corridors that went up but also sideways. Rooms that were bigger on the inside than the outside. Walls covered in symbols that seemed to move when she was not looking directly at them. Prometheus guided them through the maze. The AI could read the architect language now somehow. It led them deeper into the facility, past chambers filled with strange machinery and screens showing star systems that might not exist anymore. They found the archive in what Sarah thought of as the heart of the station. It was a massive sphere covered in glowing symbols. When they approached, the symbols rearranged themselves into English. "Welcome, young navigators," the words said. "We have waited long for someone to find us." The sphere activated. Images flooded the room. Holographic displays showing the history of the architects. Sarah watched their rise from a primitive species to masters of dimensional technology. She saw their golden age when they could travel anywhere in the universe instantly, build cities across 1,000 worlds, share thoughts across galaxies. Then she saw their first encounter with the void entities. The architects had been exploring the dimensional spaces, mapping the infinite pathways between realities. They discovered realms where physics worked differently, dimensions where time flowed backwards, spaces where thought became matter. It was incredible. It was wonderful. Until they found the hunting grounds, the void entities were not random monsters. They were hunters, predators that had evolved in the spaces between realities, feeding on the energy that leaked through natural dimensional tiers. For billions of years, they had existed in a kind of balance, taking what they needed, never entering normal space. But the architect's fracture technology changed everything. Every jump created new tiers, new paths. The hunting grounds expanded. The void entities grew stronger, and they developed a taste for the rich energy of normal space. "We thought we could control them," the archive said in a voice that sounded like wind through caves. "We built weapons, fleets designed to fight in dimensional spaces. We even tried to negotiate, to communicate with the entities. Nothing worked. They were hunger given form. They could not be reasoned with." The images showed battles that hurt to watch. Architect ships being torn apart by creatures that existed in too many dimensions to comprehend. Worlds consumed as void entities forced their way fully into normal space. The architects threw everything they had at the problem. Weapons that could tear holes in spacetime. Artificial intelligence that could think in multiple dimensions. Nothing was enough. Then they discovered the unraveling. "This is what you need to understand," the archive said. "The void entities are dangerous. They are deadly. But they are not the real threat. They are prey animals compared to what hunts them." The hologram showed something that made Sarah's blood freeze, a thing so vast it could barely be comprehended. It moved through the dimensional spaces like a shark through water. Where it passed, reality ceased to exist. Dimensions collapsed. The fabric of existence unraveled, pulled into the thing's incomprehensible mass. "We do not know what it is," the archive admitted. "We studied it for 1,000 years and learned almost nothing. It is not alive in any way we understand. It is not dead. It simply is. And it consumes, not just matter or energy. It consumes possibility itself, timelines, alternate realities, everything that could ever be or has been." The architects called it the unraveling, Prometheus said quietly. The AI sounded afraid, which should have been impossible. The hologram continued. "The void entities flee from it constantly. They came to our dimension because the unraveling was collapsing theirs. We did not invite a predator into our reality. We opened the door to refugees, and behind them came their doom." Sarah watched as the architects made their final choice. They could not kill the unraveling. They could not negotiate with it. So they did the only thing possible. They became a wall. Using fracture technology far beyond what humanity had achieved, they tore open massive dimensional rifts. Then they used those rifts to create barriers, controlled tiers in reality that formed a kind of fence. The unraveling could not pass through because the barriers existed in every dimension simultaneously. But maintaining the barriers required constant energy, constant attention, constant presence in the dimensional spaces. "We gave up our physical forms," the archive explained, "uploaded our consciousness into quantum matrices that exist partially in every dimension. We became the guardians. For 50 million years we have maintained the barriers, fighting the void entities that still try to pass through, watching the unraveling as it tests our defenses. Never resting, never stopping." "Why are you telling us this?" Webb asked. His voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. "Because the barriers are failing." The room went silent except for the hum of alien machinery. "The barriers require exponentially more energy to maintain as time passes. The unraveling has learned. It tests our weak points, probes our defenses. We are stretched thin across millions of light years. And now humanity has begun using fracture technology again. Every jump you make creates new weak points, new paths for the unraveling to exploit. So the council was right, Sarah said bitterly. We are making things worse. The council is afraid of the wrong thing, the archive said. They fear a repeat of what happened to us. But that has already happened. The barriers are failing. The unraveling is coming. The question is not whether it will break through. The question is when. Webb slammed his fist against a console. So what are we supposed to do? Just give up? Wait to be consumed? No, you fight. But you must understand what you are fighting for. This is not a war that can be won. The unraveling cannot be destroyed. It can only be contained, delayed. The architects have been delaying it for 50 million years. We have given the galaxy that much time to live, to grow, to thrive. But our time is ending. Sarah felt something click into place in her mind. A horrible, beautiful realization. You want us to take your place. We want you to join us. Humanity's ability to navigate dimensional space naturally is unique. With training, with proper technology, humans could reinforce the barriers, strengthen them. Buy the galaxy another 50 million years, maybe more. And the cost? Webb asked. The same cost we paid. Your physical bodies will be left behind. Your consciousness will be uploaded into the Guardian network. You will exist in the spaces between realities, fighting a war that never ends. You will protect life itself, but you will never get to live again. Sarah looked at her hands. Solid. Real. Human. The thought of giving that up, of becoming something that existed only in the nightmare. The Galactic Council did not believe them at first. When Sarah Chen presented the evidence from the Architect Archive, Ambassador Kael'thon listened politely but with obvious skepticism. Enforcer Jean was less diplomatic. You expect us to believe that the architects still exist? Jean said, her forearms crossed. That they have been fighting some invisible war for 50 million years and we never noticed? You never looked, Sarah said. The dimensional barriers are maintained in spaces you can't perceive. Only species with fracture technology could even detect them. And conveniently, your species is the only one with that technology, Kael'thon observed. You must understand how this appears. Humanity violates our laws, then claims there is a greater threat that only you can fight against. Captain Webb stood up, his patience exhausted. Then come with us. We'll show you the barriers. We'll take you into the dimensional spaces and prove everything we're saying. Absolutely not, Joanne growled. We will not legitimize your illegal technology by using it. The meeting ended with nothing resolved. The council agreed to review the data, but Sarah could tell they thought it was fabricated. Humans trying to justify their dangerous technology with scary stories. Then the attacks began. 3 weeks after their return from the Architect facility, a void entity appeared near a council station in the Kepler system. It manifested without warning, tearing through the dimensional barriers that had held for millions of years. The station had no defenses against something that existed partially outside reality. 15,000 aliens died before the entity retreated back into dimensional space. 2 days later, another attack, then another. The entities were small, nothing like the massive horrors Sarah had seen in her journey through the dimensional void. But they were getting through. The barriers were failing just as the architects had warned. The council could not deny the threat anymore. Ambassador Kael'thon sent an urgent message to Earth. You were right. We need your help. Sarah and Webb returned to council space with a fleet of human ships all equipped with fracture drives. They were met by representatives from 12 different species. Some were afraid. Some were angry. All of them were desperate. Show us how to fight them, Jean demanded. The Enforcer's pride had been replaced by something harder, fear. They ran simulations first. Conventional weapons were useless against void entities because the creatures existed in multiple dimensions. Shooting at them with lasers or missiles was like trying to punch fog, but fracture technology could interact with them because it operated in the same dimensional spaces. Sarah's team developed a new approach. Instead of tearing open uncontrolled rifts, they learned to create precise surgical fractures. They could open a dimensional tear right where an entity existed and collapse it quickly, cutting the creature in half between dimensions. It was dangerous. It required split-second timing. But it worked. The council was impressed but troubled. You are asking us to adopt the very technology we banned, Kael'thon said. To become what we feared. No, Sarah corrected. We're asking you to adapt. To survive. The universe doesn't care about our laws. While the council debated, more attacks came. Void entities appeared near populated worlds feeding on energy sources. The body count climbed. Panic spread through the galaxy as species that had believed themselves safe realized their protections were failing. Then, Prometheus made a discovery that changed everything. The AI had been studying the patterns of void entity attacks. They are not random, Prometheus announced during a strategy meeting. The entities are being directed, guided toward specific targets. Guided by what? Webb asked. By the unraveling. It is using them as scouts, testing the barriers systematically, looking for the weakest points. And it has found one. The hologram showed a star system near the galactic core. Designated as System 7743 by the Council, it was unremarkable except for one thing. The dimensional barriers there were stretched thin. Multiple void entities had been detected in the area, and the sensors showed something else, a massive distortion in dimensional space growing larger every day. The unraveling is coming through there, Sarah said quietly. How long do we have? 3 months at current rate of deterioration. Perhaps less if it accelerates its efforts. The Council assembled the largest fleet in galactic history. Ships from 40 different species. Thousands of vessels armed with every weapon they possessed. They also brought 15 human ships equipped with fracture drives. It was not enough. Everyone knew it was not enough. But it was all they had. The fleet arrived at System 7743 to find it already under siege. Void entities swarmed through the system like sharks. Dozens of them, ranging from small ones the size of shuttles to massive creatures that dwarfed entire planets. They had been feeding on the system's star, draining its energy to power their invasion. All ships, Jean commanded from her flagship. Engage at will. The battle was chaos. Council ships fired everything they had, but most of their weapons passed through the entities harmlessly. The void creatures tore through the fleet like paper. Sarah watched a massive alien dreadnought get pulled apart by something that looked like a hole with teeth. Human ships. This is Webb. Time to show them how it's done. The 15 human vessels moved as one. They opened precise dimensional fractures, cutting through void entities and collapsing the tiers before more could follow through. It was working, but barely. For every entity they killed, 2 more appeared. Sarah was on the bridge of humanity's newest ship, the Phoenix. She watched the tactical display and felt despair growing. They were losing. The entities kept coming, and behind them at the edge of her sensors she detected something vast approaching. The main body of the invasion. The real threat, Prometheus, she said quietly. Is there any way to reinforce the barriers from our side? To stop the entities from coming through? Theoretically, yes. But it would require maintaining an active fracture field across the entire weak point. The energy requirements would be enormous, and someone would need to navigate the dimensional spaces to guide it. Sarah closed her eyes. She knew what she had to do. What she had always been meant to do. Prepare the Phoenix for a dimensional dive. We're going in. Webb tried to argue with her over the communication channel. Chen, that's suicide. You'll be in the dimensional void with hundreds of those things. Someone has to stabilize the barrier. You know the architects were right. Someone needs to take their place. She took volunteers. She expected no one to step forward. But 30 crew members raised their hands. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, people who understood what they were volunteering for and chose to do it anyway. The Phoenix dove into dimensional space at the exact location where the barrier was weakest. Sarah and her crew found themselves in that impossible realm again. But this time they were prepared. They could see the barrier, a vast structure of energy and mathematics that stretched across dimensions. It was beautiful and terrible and dying. The void entities surrounded them immediately, massive creatures that existed in too many dimensions to fully comprehend. But the human crew worked with desperate efficiency. They deployed the fracture generators, creating a web of controlled dimensional tiers that reinforced the failing barrier. Sarah felt her consciousness expanding, connecting to the dimensional field. She could sense the architects in the distance, ancient minds spread thin across the galaxy, maintaining barriers that should have failed millennia ago. They were dying, fading, but they held on. We see you, young navigator. The architects' voices whispered through the dimensional static. You have come to join the watch. Not yet, Sarah said. First, we're going to try something you never did. We're going to win. She reached out through the dimensional space connecting to Prometheus. The AI's consciousness joined with hers, and together they accessed the knowledge from the architect archive. 50 million years of accumulated understanding of dimensional mathematics. Sarah had an idea. A desperate, probably impossible idea. The unraveling could not be killed. But maybe it did not need to be. The architects had tried to fence it out. What if instead they gave it what it wanted? She explained her plan to the crew. To the architects. To Prometheus. They all thought she was insane. But insanity was humanity's specialty. Using the fracture generators at maximum power, they tore open a massive dimensional rift. Not to the normal universe, but to somewhere else. Another reality entirely. One that was empty. Dead. A universe that had already collapsed in on itself, leaving nothing but dimensional void. You want to consume? Sarah shouted into the dimensional chaos. Then consume this. They redirected the unraveling's attention, showing it the path to the dead universe. A feast of dimensional energy with no life to complicate things. No barriers, no defenders. Just endless nothing to unravel. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the unraveling shifted. Its vast, incomprehensible bulk changed direction. It moved toward the rift Sarah had opened. Slowly, cautiously, but it moved. The void entities followed their master, hundreds of them streaming away from the galaxy. Drawn toward the easier meal, the pressure on the barriers decreased immediately. It's working, breathed Captain Webb from his ship. My God, it's actually working. Thank you for watching and comment for next part.